Hi, my name's Andrew Embling, and I want to share with you an understanding of how we see the world around us. And that's important because how we represent the world directly affects our behaviour, our feelings, our physiology. Well, I think that's enough. I think that's the key bit. Once we understand the premise that we represent the world by means of our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste, what we smell. These are all stimuluses. These are all generating electrical impulses that then form our representation, our model of the world. And this is how this then generates our emotions and our behaviors. And when I'm working in this field of well-being, that's directly what I'm seeing from the clients that I work with. Is we want to create change, and the change is directly related to how the client feels, how they perceive the world around them, or they're looking to create a change in the behavior that they notice they're demonstrating. And this is why, once we understand how we see the world around us and how this directly influences these things, these states, these thoughts, and our behavior, from that point, that understanding comes empowerment, which is why I think this is so important. So, can you remember a time perhaps when you were aware of something in the distance, and at that point you created a belief of what that was, and then when that came closer, it was something completely different again? So this is how we form that model of the world around us, that representation, based at any single point, that moment in time where what information we have is how we represent the world around us. So it can be summed up and illustrated by what's referred to perhaps as the NLP Communication Model, which is, in its essence, what underpins NLP. Once we understand how we communicate with others, how we communicate with ourselves, then that's almost the master key. Something, if we become aware of, then can inform us, empower us. So, along with this, I'm capturing this video now, and we're playing it back alongside the slides, which I'm hoping you can see now. So, first slide. So we've got the title slide there, the NLP Communication Model, and we can see clearly we've got this external event coming in. And this external event, whatever we're witnessing, whatever we're observing in the moment, in the now, we are going to measure through our stimuluses that are available to us. And that's what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we smell, and what we taste. And those, as I was saying, that's generating electrical impulses into our brain through our body. And it's those electrical impulses that we then interpret to form how we represent the world. Now, there's a lot of information we're going to be receiving, and I invite you to go and Google how much information do we process, and it's consistently a large number. I'm not going to quote it now because it's varying depending on what source you want to validate. But it's a huge amount of information that we are presented with, and as we can't effectively process all of that information, so we have to filter it, and we will filter that information. We will delete it, we will distort it, and we will generalize it. And we'll go over a little bit more detail of what that is in a moment. So we go through this filtering process, and how we filter it. We have a set of filters that are used, and those filters are attitude, our values and beliefs, our meta programs, the decisions that we've made, our memories, language, and the situation and circumstance at that moment in time. All of these things combined, and whatever stands out to us as a preference at that moment will be how we filter the information, how we delete it, distort it, and generalize it. So this then goes to create our internal representation. We will then, as you'll see, got a blank canvas. And we fill that canvas in. We create our own internal representation upon the information that we left, that we haven't filtered out. And with that information, we will give it a label, we'll give it an identity, and we can refer to that as our internal voice. And within NLP, that's called our auditory digital sense, how we are communicating ourselves, our own internal language, if you will. Now, once we've given that a label, that means something to us, and then that directly affects or creates, if you will, our state, our emotion. And then that emotion directly affects or creates, influences our physiology, our heart rate, our breathing, our body chemistry, the way we stand, hold ourselves, present ourselves. And these three things combined, our internal representation, our state, our physiology, all influence and affect directly our behavior. And our behavior is, I guess, the biggest window that we present to the world. Well, it's the obvious one, perhaps, to look at. The important thing here is to be mindful of how we represent the world, our representation, the picture we create, our state, our emotion, our physiology. These are the things that generate that behavior. Now, if you take those as three individual items, the physiology, the state, the internal representation, if you were to, for want of a word, hack any one of those points, because you can see it's bi-directional, then that influences your behavior too. So for okay, internal representation. So if I ask you to think of your favorite food, So when you think of your favorite food now, do you get a picture? And that's what I mean. So that is something tangible, perhaps, and that picture will have different variables around it. It'll be color. Perhaps it'll be black and white. It'll be moving, perhaps, or it'll be still. It'll be close. It'll be far. It'll be perhaps in the center, be off to the side, be below. It'll have a location, and there may be sounds that are important to it. There may be feelings that are important to it. There are a lot of parameters and dynamics associated to how we represent what we're bringing to mind. And those are the keys that we then use in change techniques within the world of NLP, if you will. So, just with that favorite food, it's possible that you created that physiological response. If it's something, really fresh and you're bringing to mind, you may have started to water, may have created a comforting, warm feeling inside. So, it's making you feel good and uplifted. So perhaps at this point you can see how these things are all related, our physiology, our state, and our internal representation. Now, the state. So again, what I was saying, any one of these things we can hack, for want of a word, to influence our behavior, so that we behave in a way that empowers us, but in a circumstance and situation. So if someone were to say to me, if they want to create change and they simply say, I want to feel happier. Well, that's something that anybody can do at any single point in time. All you've got to do is remember a time in the past where you were happy and go back to that time in your mind and see what you saw, hear what you heard, and feel what you felt. And these things that what you see, hear, and feel at the time, bring them to mind, make them fresh, make them bigger, make them brighter. And as you take on that remembrance, you're forming a picture, and you're influencing your physiology, and you're instantly behaving differently. So this aspect of wanting to change your behavior can be as simple as that. Simple as remembering a time in the past when you were behaving how you want to behave, how you were feeling how you want to feel, and how your physiology was and how you want it to be. So anxiety we see, or we can measure, or we can sense through a shortness of breath, an increased heart rate. So once we know that, and that's being generated by thinking about something that we don't want. We're concentrating, we're focusing, if you will, we're focusing on what we don't want. And then that generates our state and our physiology. So stop focusing on what you don't want and focus on what you do want. And once you're focusing on an outcome that you do want, then that feeds into your emotions, and then that feeds into your physiology. It's a simple thing to say, and with practice can be very, very effective. So this is an outline. It's not I'm not giving you the solution to everything here. This is an awareness, and with awareness comes empowerment, knowing that change is possible. And hopefully you're getting there and understanding, and you're beginning to now believe and see and understand how our behavior is influenced by all of these three dynamics: the internal representation, the state, and the physiology. So earlier I mentioned all of the filters, so I'll go over them though in more detail in a moment. Right now I just want to kind of go into a little bit more about how we see this used in the world around us. Now, I was talking about state, how we can remember a time in the past. Now we also use states, or we can create states that we want and desire in a circumstance, a situation that's going to benefit us through physical anchors. And you see sports people doing this. Gary Hall Jr., and a gold medalist, Olympic gold medalist swimmer, he would pinch his earlobes to evoke a state that was empowering to him before a race, would set him up ready to go, to put him into that mindset that he was going to win, that he would generate that simply, and that's through practice. So as we were saying a moment ago, when you remember a time in the past when you had the feelings that you want right now, go back to that time, see what you saw, hear what you heard, feel what you felt, and at the peak of that feeling, you can create a physical stimulus, which is then can be associated to that feeling. So in Gary Hall Jr.'s case, it was the pinching of an earlobe. It could be anything that's easily repeatable and isn't then going to be overstimulated in normal everyday life. So knuckles, so you could either press on a knuckle that if you're a person who holds your hands, then perhaps you're going to overstimulate that. But perhaps you could go in between the knuckles. So a point that isn't going to be once established isn't then going to be accidentally stimulated to almost wear it out, to overstimulate it so it becomes a norm again. So we can create state through physical stimulus as well. And it's used very therapeutically to help business people, people who are on the phones perhaps and apprehensive about doing it. So we can create a physical stimulus that puts that person in a state where they're happy, they're confident, and they're motivated to make those calls. So it has a lot of benefits in everyday life, whether it's a physical activity, a sport, or a business, or just going about your everyday life to overcome what has maybe challenged you in the past. Now, physiology, how we can hack physiology. Now, a lady, Amy Cuddy, who works in the Harvard Business School. She did a study she talked about in 2012 about a study that she conducted where, commonly, perhaps you're already aware of it, referred to a lot as power posing today. So she talked about how if in the animal kingdom, if somebody wants to be dominant, if somebody wants to be empowered, they make themselves bigger and wider and stand out. They take up more space. So if you were to take on a pose, if you were to take on a stature where you're bigger, you're taking up more space, almost you're standing with that pose with your hands on your hips. I have a slide here which generated by Amy Cuddy, which illustrates empowering poses, and low power poses, high power poses and low power poses. So, and these have a direct influence on the levels of testosterone and cortisol. So testosterone is a measure we can use to kind of show how empowered we are, and the cortisol is, I guess, a measure of how triggered we can be by stressful situations, how much it influences us. And there is a measurable difference. So if you're taking on a high power pose, your testosterone goes up and your cortisol levels drop. And then the complete polar opposite, if you're making yourself smaller, if you're making yourself more insignificant, taking up less space, the testosterone levels can be seen to drop and the cortisol levels can seem to increase. And so basically taking this and fitting it into what we already know about how we represent the world in our minds, how our state and our physiology. If we know this is happening in our physiology, then we can begin to imagine how it affects our state and how we are seeing the world, and then ultimately our behavior. As part of Amy Cuddy's study, what she did in the sample group is they did mock interviews with the test subjects, and they were filmed, and these films were played back, I believe I'm right in saying that, to potential to employers, and they were asked for their feedback. And across the board, what they were saying is that the people who had taken on the high powered postures were more attractive and stood out. And I think what the really interesting thing here is it wasn't because their answers were smarter, that they were thinking bigger and bolder and brighter. It was purely because across the board they said they brought more of themselves to the interview. They were more genuine, they were more present, and they just stood out, which I think that's amazing once you understand that. And that's simply from taking on a more powerful pose. And it's important to point out here is that I'm not saying you're going to go into interviews now and stand with your hands on your hips to generate this increased testosterone. What I'm saying, what Amy Cuddy is quite clear in saying, is that in the time before, in a time when you want to be empowered, more assertive, more confident and comfortable, take 2 minutes of that free time in a place that's private and stand in that pose for 2 minutes, and that's all it takes. So that is, I think, it is amazing to see. It's a big illustration of how this NLP communication model comes to reality now. We can see it influence and benefit us. So a minute ago I was talking about the filters. So we're going to bring everything back up on the screen here now, and we're just going to go through those filters so you can understand what we're talking about here. So let me start with attitudes. So attitudes is our values in groups of in subjects, for one of the word. Our attitude to fashion, our attitude to music. So if that's what we're filtering, then we will use our grouping, our collective of values and beliefs on a subject to discriminate and to focus. Our values and beliefs Our values are how we judge right from wrong, good from bad. And our beliefs are what we believe to be true, what we believe 100% to be true. And these are formed as our experiences in life evolve. So our values and beliefs can evolve. Our metaprograms. Metaprograms are, for want of a word, are archetype or patterns. So it's if you, and of course you can go into this in a lot of detail, Jungian archetypes. It's our preference. So for want of a word, do you have a preference to be in a crowd, or do you have a preference to be more on your own? Do you find in downtime that to regenerate and to be refreshed, you need to spend time alone, or do you need to be in a group? Do you find it's easier to make decisions by talking over things with others and trying out ideas verbally and listening to how that, and understanding it greater, or can you do that all on your own? So we have preferences of who we are and how we operate. So another one is, when we're looking at a situation, do we can almost step outside, see all of the detail, and objectively observe and create a decision? Or do we find we take on things very personally and it's very subjective, the outcome that we create? So we have preferences. This doesn't mean it's that's us and it's one way. We have a preference, and that doesn't stop us drawing on all aspects of behavioral opportunities or possibilities. Decisions are literally choices that we make at that moment in time based on our life experience and based on what we know, our values, our beliefs, all these things we've already mentioned. Decisions are sometimes made in a high emotional state. If we make a decision in a highly emotional state, which is potentially negative, then that can then form a belief that can be disempowering. And I think it's important just to think about beliefs just a moment now to kind of recap. Beliefs can be empowering or disempowering. So we can believe things that I can, or I can't, or what if. So decisions can be the creator of beliefs. Memories are what we're kind of talking about now. Memories are how we've recorded something from the past. And be mindful of what we're talking about here, because we've recorded that based upon our sensory input that we have available. Already how we've filtered it, or how we've deleted, distorted, and generalized. And then what's left is what's formed our memories. So they're your memories. So if you've got siblings, perhaps you can remember them, or colleagues, or if a group of people are experiencing a single event, then if you ask any individual in a group to recall when something happened, it's more than likely that you'll be aware and you can remember a time when everybody's recalled a situation differently, but you've all been there and experienced it at the same time. It's because you've all deleted, distorted, and generalized based upon your filters. So these memories are your memories, how you've stored them. Language is, again, key. If we're just simply using language to form an internal representation. So if you take a menu, for example, in a restaurant, you've got a linguistic representation of a food. So if you've not had that food type before, you're going to form a representation based on the words used and what they mean to you. So when that food arrives, does it live up to how your beliefs, how you've filtered and created that internal representation? So language, again, is, and we call this the map is not the territory within NLP. So if you will, the map is your menu, and the territory is what you actually then live and experience yourself. So language is crucial here. So, and again, if you look at these filters, and language being the biggest way that we communicate ourselves to another person, and you understand that what our behavior and our words are coming through from our filters outside, and then remember that these are going into another person's through their filters before they create representation. So see the cycle, be mindful of this. Situation and circumstance is what it says. So the information you have to filter, is it morning, is it evening, are you energized, are you tired, where are you, when are you, who are you with, who are you not with. All of these situations and circumstances, time, place, now, are an influence on how you filter. So hopefully right now you're getting an idea of how individual we are and how we individually see the world. So just a quick insight then into what we're just saying about what we delete, what we distort, and we generalize. So we will every day be taking all the information in around us. So for example, if you've suddenly shown an interest in a specific make of car or a certain color of car, and have you noticed then that the days that follow, how you then see that color, that style, that make, that model? Now, it's not a case of they've never been there, but right now they're important to you, so you're no longer deleting that information, you're actually seeing it. Distorting it, so distorting it, so a simple thing here, how we can distort information in a positive way here is, you can imagine a room before it's decorated, so you're then going to have to change what you see and distort it into something else, how you imagine it to be. And it could be imagining an item of clothing on. How am I going to look or feel if I wear this? And generalize. We generalize. Generalization is important because that's the way we learn, because we can chunk information up over a period of time, so that when we experience something similar, we can create a generalization in a positive way to try on board. Does that then fit into what we've experienced, so that we can move forward faster in almost learning through chunks? At the same time, we need to be mindful of that generalization doesn't create assumptions that are wrong. So we always have to be kind of going through that loop and that cycle to check in. So these are all things that we do naturally. We do them so unconsciously that it's just part of who we are. So everything I'm talking about here right now, this, how we communicate internally, how we then communicate to others, and it has to go through their communication model. This is bringing it to your awareness. And for me, awareness brings empowerment because it brings choice. So I hope that's a useful insight and is empowering and maybe generates more questions. So for me, these are the building blocks of all change, and used extensively within the NLP method of change techniques. So again, that's been helpful. If you have any questions or queries, please, I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, you take care.